Okay, part 4 of Sumas Pub Prawns is Carl comes to Canada. We only saw Brenda and Cicely and the rest of the family when we took our road trips down to Oakland. But Carl would also come up and visit us in Canada when he'd bring some of his friends and military buddies to come visit and go on fishing trips. I now wonder why he never brought the family, and I wish I would have asked him because it would have been so much fun to show Brenda and Cicely all of my favorite places in BC. I think Arvin and Alvin, their older twin brothers, would have really liked BC too. And in hindsight, the two of them might have been part of the reason why my dad stopped taking me to Oakland in 1980. I never asked my dad why we stopped going, but a lot of changes happened to me and for me that year, the year that I turned 12. We'll get to that in another story. But this particular trip happened before that, when Carl and two of his friends were coming up for a trip to Blue Lake in 1976. And this was a trip that prompted the practice of going to the Prawn Shop before crossing the border. Carl was coming up to BC with two of his buddies. It was a long drive from Oakland, but they took turns driving and drove straight from California to Washington State. They decided to stop in Sumas to get gas and have a quick bite to eat before crossing the border into Canada. Carl called my dad from a payphone at the gas station saying that they were going to have a quick bite to eat and that they'd head over to our place after that. My dad suggested that he come down and have a bite to eat with them. Carl tells my dad to meet them at the Burger Palace, which is this casual sit-down restaurant that's just down the road from the gas station he was calling from. Overhearing my dad's side of the conversation, I begged my dad to go along for the ride to Sumas. Being my dad's favorite, he looked at it as another learning opportunity for me and agreed to take me with him. I really liked Carl and was looking forward to seeing him and having some alone time with the adults. When I was the only kid present, my dad would sometimes let me stick around for the conversations, provided that I chose my moments to speak judiciously. Because for the most part, I grew up during the era where children were to be seen and not heard. But because I had such strong verbal skills and I was unquenchably curious, my dad would sometimes allow me to participate in adult conversations. I chatted excitedly with my father as we drove the 20 minutes to the Sumas border crossing. Blue Lake was one of my favorites of all the different places we went camping and fishing because I always met other little kids every time we went there. This would be Carl's first time going to Blue Lake, and I wanted to tell him all about what to expect there. Unbeknownst to us at the time, while we were driving to Sumas, Carl and his friends were being watched by some local Sumas hicks while they were getting gas. One of Carl's friends noticed the young men staring at them and briefly made eye contact with one of them. Apparently, that particular hick took offense and started loudly making racist comments about Carl and his friends. Carl ignored them as he paid for his gas, but also noticed when they followed them over to the Burger Palace. As they all waited to be seated, the hicks started talking under their breath, but loud enough for Carl and his friends to hear, about white hoods and burning crosses and other similar kind of hateful comments. Even though Carl and his friends arrived first, the hostess seated the hicks without even acknowledging that Carl and his friends were there. When we arrived, they still hadn't been seated, and the hicks were continuing to harass them from their table. Even though Carl and his friends were significantly bigger and could easily have handled them, they didn't want any trouble and wouldn't be provoked into fighting. When my dad walked into the restaurant, the hostess immediately acknowledged him and me. "Table for two, sir?" the hostess says, grabbing two menus. "No," my dad says. "There were 5 of us," and points to Carl and his friends. "Oh," the hostess says, and just stands there, looking away. My dad glares at her. "Are you serious right now?" he says, his German accent sounding particularly pronounced. The hostess doesn't say anything. My dad looks over at Carl and his friends and says, "Let's get the fuck out of here. I know a better place." You know my dad is mad when he just casually swears like that in public. We leave and head over to the prawn shop where we enjoy baskets of prawns and fries with absolutely no hassle. Carl fills us in on what had happened, and my dad's eyes got really dark and narrow, just like mine do whenever someone tells me about an injustice that has been done to them. We finished our meal and head to the border crossing, which is literally just outside the prawn shop. As we stop at the Canadian border crossing to cross back into Canada, my dad doesn't mince words with the border crossing officer. He tells the officer that the 3 men in the car behind us are veterans who serve their country well, our tax-paying citizens had had a long drive and that we'd be waiting at the border crossing for them to clear. The officer nodded in understanding and directed us to an alcove to wait for our friends. Moments later, they cleared the border and pulled out of the alcove so they could follow us back to our place. The border officer had allowed them to cross in peace.